This week, we're back to the bench doctor. We've got Scott back. He's got an M1 Carbine. He's going to tell us all about it. So if you've seen these before, you know that you're in for an evening of him taking apart a gun that you can't afford and hitting it with a hammer.
Welcome. Yeah, as Ed mentioned, this is an M1 Carbine, and I thought I would disassemble it and explain to people how to do it. It's a pretty simple gun to take apart, with the exception of the gas piston and the bolt. I don't have the tool yet to take the bolt completely apart, so I'm not going to do it today, but I have ordered a new gas piston and a new gas piston plug, so I can take those out and show you how that goes together. That's not a piece that you would normally take apart for normal cleaning and maintenance, unless you have a problem with it, unless your gas system is misbehaving or it's just plain stuck, and it's not a lubricated part. But we'll talk about that when we get to that point. This is it's all GI stuff, with the exception of the receiver. I don't know, last year we kind of talked about my milsurp collection, and this was kind of an oddball in that about the time Universal was building these in the early 60s, a few other companies got all the pieces to assemble them, with the exception of the receivers. And this company, Aspen, made a few thousand of these receivers themselves. The difficult part was drilling them for the guide rod and recoil spring. And this is one of the ones that is actually decent. It's held together. The Universals, I think, are fairly well made, but they started diverging from the original design, and so now the later Universals, the parts aren't interchangeable. But that's the only part on this gun that isn't GI or correct GI, but it is it's very similar to the GI receiver, so you won't probably notice much of a difference, with the exception of the finish on it is kind of a plum blue versus the parkerizing that you'd get on a World War II refurb or a Korean War era. So this is it. It's a small gun. It's empty. I'll take the magazine out. The magazine's empty. The receiver's empty, as you can see. There's got a bolt hold back right here on the top of the slide, or the rod here. You push down on this, and there's a little detent that drops into a little divot on the top of the receiver, and to release it, you just pull back and it lets go. I don't rely on that. This one, when I got it, that was missing, so I ordered the parts and put them in there, but it isn't 100% reliable. So with the I don't want to risk getting M1 thumb here, M1 Carbine thumb, so I don't generally stick my finger in there if it's pinned back like that. But this is pretty much bone stock. It does come with a bayonet, and this looks a lot like the later bayonets for the M16s, but it's similar to the World War II bayonets. The difference is this loop right here is a little bit closer on this hilt. On the later ones, it's a little further out, because this is made to go over the barrel and slide into the lug on this gun. So it slips over like that. It's pretty familiar design. So that's what it looks like with the bayonet on it. These bayonets are getting a little harder to find. They're still available, but they're getting a little more expensive than they used to be. But it takes the regular M8 sheath, which is nice. Those are pretty available, and they use that for many, many years. So they're pretty easy to get. So first thing I'm going to do, taking this apart, is I'm going to take this front ring here, and you don't need to take the screw all the way out. It's kind of just a clamp. I'm just going to loosen it, and then I'm going to press down on the ring right here. There's just a little tab that I just push down on, and it allows this to slip out over the edge of the barrel. And you don't need to take it all the way off. So I'm just going to unscrew it, loosen it up. Then I'm going to push down, slide it forward, loosen it up a little bit more. These guns are a lot of fun if you've never fired one. I'm sure if you have one, you know how fun they are. It shoots a 30 carbine. It's a round that is a lot like a pistol, almost like a pistol round. They say it's about as powerful as a 357, but at 100 yards. So it's got some, you know, I don't shoot it much past 100 yards. I find that that's pretty much about as far. I know that they're capable of it in better hands than mine, but that's about the distance that I prefer to shoot it. I have a lot of fun. I shoot it in you know, as a PCC sometimes, which is a lot of fun. Right there. So that slides forward like so. And that's your bayonet lug too. You can see that this is all one piece. Slides forward and out of my way. From there, I can just lift this top handguard off. And the top handguard has a little edge right here that slips up under this little lip on the receiver. So it just slides right up under there. And there are a few different handguards. This is an early or later World War II one because it's got the 4 holes in it. The early ones had 2 holes up here. Not sure why. I think it's just the rivets that they use to hold this clip on. You see aftermarket metal ones with holes drilled in it, like a heat shield. But this is the standard military one that I'm familiar with. And from there, let's see here. We can now slide. Yep. Hold on a second. Make sure everything's pathetic. I also took my sling off. It also there's a sling attachment up here on this front barrel band, and I unsnapped it. It simply just snaps over like that. And then in the back, or I mean on the butt of the gun, it's held in place right here. Let me see if I can get a better look at this. Right here, there's a little oil bottle in there. This is an oiler, and this goes through the end of the sling and then is held in place. The oiler holds the sling in place. So that's kind of a neat little option. And that just pops out. It's supposed to have oil in it for the GI. Then you can oil it and then put a sling back together. So from here, that you just remove that front barrel band and then the whole receiver slides out. There is a piece right here that's screwed down through the stock. You do not need to remove this screw. This is a recoil lug, and it's what the receiver slides up under, and it kind of retains the receiver. So from here, unless you want to take that off, there's no real reason to remove that unless you need to clean down in there. At this point, I'm just going to set the stock aside. And we'll get to work on the receiver. This is really where the business happens. And right here on the bottom, you'll see this big square block. This is where your gas system is. There's a gas piston in there and a little kind of a castle-like nut that holds it in place. And I'll go into a little bit more detail with that. But from here, now I'm going to take this spring out. And it's got a guide rod, so I just kind of compress it down and slide it up out of my way. Like so. And it looks like this. This is kind of a wear part. If you're having problems, these springs are available new. It's a part that's easy to replace and it's fairly inexpensive, you know, probably $10. I don't remember what I spent, but I don't remember it being cost prohibitive. And then there's a little guide rod that goes down inside that. So the problem they were having with casting these things was this recoil spring goes up here into the front where this bar is, and it's drilled all the way down through the receiver back down here. And so a lot of these manufacturers were having a difficult time drilling this nice and straight all the way through. So a lot of them cast this part as opposed to forging it. And so some of them are a little weaker than others, but that's where the spring slides all the way down this recess. So from there, we can now take this, are off. So we're going to line it up, and I'll have to show you after I get it off. It's really not enough detail here to make sense of it. But let me get it lined up and slide it off. Okay. So there's a little notch right here on the frame that corresponds to this notch right here inside this guide or this action bar here. So you line those up, and then this pops right off, and then the back of your bolt slides in right here. So when I go to reassemble this, it'll make a little bit more sense. But you can take that aside. I usually clean this and make sure it's nice and dry in here, because you don't want any oil or grease or lubricants or anything to get in where this gas piston is. This needs to be dry. So from here, you can now take your trigger group off, and there's a little pin right here at the front, at the base of the trigger group, and you just pop that out like so. It's just a straight pin. You shouldn't need a hammer or anything to take that out, and your trigger group comes right off. Now, there's no reason to disassemble this unless you're putting this spring back in, and this spring is really a lot of fun to put in there. It's under quite a bit of tension. It's your trigger spring, and I don't recommend changing it unless you need to. But this piece comes off, and it's very easy to clean. So from here, now you can remove your bolt, and it just kind of finagles out of the way. You just kind of slide it out, rotate it around until it comes out, and there's your bolt. Now, there is a special tool for disassembling this. I've ordered one, but I don't have it yet. So I'm not going to disassemble the bolt and pull the firing pin out. You can see the firing pin back here. This is your extractor, and but I'm not going to take this apart because I don't want to give you guys the satisfaction of watching me try to put this thing together without the appropriate tools. And then, like I said earlier, this is your gas system right here. There's a little piston in there. There's a hole drilled in the barrel. It's kind of slanted down, and some of the gas is siphoned off, and it goes into this lug right here and pushes that piston back, which then forces this rod back, moving the bolt, ejecting the spent casing, and then stripping one off the top. Inside here, there's a little castle nut right here. You can see this one only has 2 little grooves in it. Most of them have 3. I don't know this one is aftermarket or what it is, but it's not the standard one. And these are also staked. So if you have to remove one of these, they're going to be staked. You're going to have a little bit of a struggle getting it out. And you're going to want to replace it, because once it's been staked, the metal's been smacked with a punch. You're better off just replacing it and the little gas piston while you're in there, because I wouldn't want to mess around. So I've taken this one loose, and I had to use a punch and just kind of knock it around, because the factory wrench doesn't fit this. I've ordered the wrench and a new gas piston because this one's kind of marred up, but I'll take it out since I have the opportunity to do it right here. This one was stuck in there, so I wanted to remove it and clean that out. You don't want any oil or grease or anything, because hot gas hits this and it turns that grease and oil to just black carbon like concrete, and you end up having to remove that. Now, this is going to be fun to get this piston out. This is the problem, is this piston is stuck and it won't work properly. It works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm going to remove it and replace it, but I'm going to go ahead and pull it out so you can see what it looks like. I can get it out of there. And you never want to do what I'm doing here, which is grab it with a pair of pliers. I'm doing it because this is a sacrificial piece and I'm replacing it. I just want to pull it out to show you what it looks like. But you don't want to mar this up. I figured it was a good time to show it since I was going to replace this. At least you could picture what it is. It's kind of what happens. I think somebody probably oiled this or greased it and got some sort of carbon down in this thing, and it was wedged in there. I had to soak it in the coil for a couple of days for it to break it loose. And then I was able to finally work it out of there, but it is not fun. Well, I'll leave it in there. I don't want to struggle with this all night, but it looks like this. It's about that long, and it has a wider base at the bottom, and that surface is machined to perfectly ride inside this cylinder. And you can see right here where this one was staked, there's a hole in it, and they took a punch and drove down through it and staked it to keep this nut from backing out. But like I said, if you ever have to remove this, replace everything. Don't take chances with reusing a staked nut. It's just not worth the headache, because if this backs out and that gas piston, the gun's not going to run properly, and it could damage something. So just replace it. They're easy to get. I bought mine, I believe, through Liberty Tree Collectors, and I think they're available in pretty much anybody that carries a lot of old gun parts should have them available. But anyway, that's the receiver, and it's got this. This is the later sight on these. The earlier sights were different. And when I lubricate this, since it's an old World War II gun, I just use this old white lithium grease for everything, because that's kind of what they used on the M1 Garands, was just a white grease. And it works really well. I grease these channels right here on this side of the gun. I grease a little bit inside here. There's a couple of channels. I grease the bolt. I just run a coating of grease around the bolt, because this stuff all rubs together. And I put a little drop of oil on the trigger group here on the spring and on each of these pins, just to keep water and contamination out of there than to really lubricate it. I just like, I don't like rust forming inside the gun. But this is about as far as you'd ever want to take one of these down. To rebarrel it, you'd have to pull this barrel off the receiver, and you probably need a special fixture to put this in a vise to avoid cracking it or breaking it. And then this one, since it's not a non-GI receiver, this was brazed on here. This gas lug was brazed on here. I believe the GI ones were either welded or machined. This piece was machined out. I don't recall, but the brazing's interesting here. That would tell you that this is not a GI receiver. This one is marked Aspen right here, right up under this sight. And it's a kind of a polished plum purple, probably not showing up on the screen. And it should be a black parkerized finish like this, if it were a military, arsenal refurb. So that's pretty much it on the disassembly of one of these. 90% of the problems I've found with these things are with the magazines, with feeding issues. People blame the ammo. They think it's the guide rod and all that stuff. Change magazines, buy new magazines. They're readily available. They're not hard to get. People like to run the old GI mags. This is just a Korean magazine, and it runs really well. You get some of the old GI mags, and the feed lips get worn out, and the followers, they just wear out. This is the weak point of these guns. So if you're having issues, a cheap fix is usually the magazine. So try that first. All right, well, let's go ahead and put this thing back together. So I'm going to start by putting my bolt in, and this just kind of drops into the receiver, and you kind of have to just finagle it a little bit. And I put it in with this part down. That seems to be the easiest way for me. Just kind of drop it up in there and rotate it until it drops into place. Bear with me here. This is always a little bit of a game here to get this to drop in. And then when you go to put your this rod back on, you want the bolt all the way back. Hold on, it's not in place there. This is always fun. There we go. So it should be like that. It just should ride cleanly. I push it all the way back, and then I take this piece and I'm going to line up this tab right here with the corresponding cutout in the receiver right there. I'm going to pull my bolt back again. I'll get out of the way. That. So this is going to go on there. Kind of fit it up in there. Kind of a strange angle to be doing this. Hold on just a second. I can't see what I'm doing. You want, hold on a second, get this out of my way. This bolt keeps sliding back. I'm doing this from a different angle than I normally would. So it's a little bit odd. But this groove right here in this rod connects right here. This is where that rod grabs this bolt and moves it back and forth. Is this fits into there like that. So when this moves, that's what's moving the rod, is that lug. So let me get that back in place. This thing, I should lubricate it and make my life easier, but anyway, hold on just one second. Yeah, I always have to fiddle with this thing. Oops. Well, I'm sorry, Ed, I haven't hit anything with a hammer. Let's see if I can figure out a place.
Oh, we'll give it time.
Yeah, we'll find a place to use it on this gun. This gun is really simple to field strip. It's one of the nice things about it. You know, it's just that one band and then it just comes apart. Oh, come on, bolt. I don't know why this thing is doing this today. Anyway, are there any questions up to this point, or is this just fascinating TV?
We have a bunch of questions, actually.
All right. About my sanity?
Well, that's a common question that I just stopped asking you, because we don't need to ask the same question at every one of these. How good are the commercial variants of the M1 Carbine, and what is a good price range for them?
The early universals, I think, were okay. I think the ones made in the early 60s were decent guns, but I think they were still built to mil spec. You know, they were still built on the same design, but they started to vary, I think, in the second version of it. And then the second and third versions are not good guns. I probably would be fine buying a third release a first release of them, but I'd stay away from the later ones. This Aspen's been great. I've owned it for a few years and it's run great. Fulton Armory, I think, makes good ones. I see that they still make them, and they appear to sell well and they appear to hold up. I've read good reviews of them, but I don't know much about. I think a good price for them. A good mil spec, they're running $800 or $900. So I would not pay probably more than $400 or $500 for a non-mil spec one. I got this one for less than $400. Someday, if I ever find a military receiver, I will go ahead and put the receiver back on use that on this gun, but it's kind of hard to find just a receiver. So anyway, let me get this back on. Any other questions?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
My castle nut is not staked. It sometimes loosens. Anything that can be done? Loctite, etc.?
I'd stake it. I don't know. You'd have to have maybe that new blue, Loctite that's not heat, or that is made for heat, because there is a lot of heat in there in that part of the gun. So blue Loctite may and red Loctite may eventually just fail because of the heat. So now I need to get this is lined up and back in this channel right here. Now I need to get this over that lug, and there's a little spot back here where it drops in on the receiver right there. So now you see as this rod moves, it's moving the bolt. The other thing you could do is just stake the nut, and you can go online and find videos on how to do it. it's not hard. You would probably want a hard surface like the top, like an anvil or the top of a vise, a mechanic's vise. It's got the flat spot in the back and a punch, a good solid punch, and you can stake it. And it's not hard to do, but that would be the factory way of properly doing that. So once this is back together, you can now take your trigger group, and it kind of slides in. There's a groove right here on these ears, and it slides in to a groove back here and aligns itself. And it just kind of slides in there, and then once it's in place, come on, you can now drop this pin back in. And like I said, the pin is just lightly in there. It's held in by the stock. When you put the stock on, it has nowhere to go. And it should only come out one way because it's got a head on it. It's got a little bit of a head on it. So it'll only come in from one side. So that pops through once everything's properly aligned. So that's now in place. You take your spring and guide rod, and that feeds down this long drilled hole right here. So that just slides in like so. And then there is a little detent. Let's see if I can show it here. Turn it around. And there's a little detent right here, a little hole that the tip of this guide rod fits into. So I just pull it back far enough. See, like that. And it drops right in. The tip of the guide rod just clicks in there and holds it in place. So now this is all back together, spring loaded. And then from here, you just drop it back in your stock and it just falls right into place. You want to make sure that this little kind of ear on the back, this lug on the back of the receiver, clips up under the back of this lug. So it just kind of drops in place like that. Should just lay right in there like so. And you'll notice right here that little lug is now covering that hook or that other protrusion on the back of the receiver. Then you just take your handguard and it slides right up under the end of the receiver. There's a little bit of a collar right there. And takes a little bit of finagling. There it goes. So that's in place. Then I just lower my barrel band back down. And it clips in place right here on this little clip. And then you put your barrel band screw back in. And it's threaded on one side, so it only goes together one way. That goes back in there. And this just needs to be tightened down enough so it doesn't move. You don't have to really cinch it down because it's retained by this clip on the front of the stock. So you just kind of screw that in there like so. And that's it. That's how you take apart and put back together an M1 carbine.
Not a hammer.
No hammer to be seen. Well, I mean, I've got hammers, but I can't think of anything I need to hit with it.
Well, there's a question about polishing the feed ramp. Can you work a hammer into the answer for that?
No, but I've never had to polish the feed ramp on mine. I've never had the need to do it. I've owned a couple of these. I had one back in the early 90s, and usually, like I said before, the feeding problems I had with it were magazine related, rarely gun related. And I've never polished the feed ramp on one of them. I don't see how it would do much harm unless you got super aggressive with it. I wouldn't use much more than a polishing compound and a soft, cotton wheel. I wouldn't use any kind of an abrasive on it. I'd use maybe a polishing compound and a Dremel with a soft wheel and get in there and polish it. It probably wouldn't hurt anything.
Okay. Next question. Given that KCI mags are getting harder to find, what would you recommend in terms of commercial magazines?
Gosh, the only ones I've ever used are I don't know if they're KCI or whatever these Korean ones are, that they're always available. They're Korean made. Oh, this one, this is a World War II mag. It's got the IA stamped in it. But I've got several of the Korean ones. They must be KCI, because I think it's the only manufacturer. Oh, now there's a SG, I guess, over there as well. But I don't have any problem sourcing these. The 15 rounders are pretty easy to get. Even unused GI mags, they're more expensive, but they're pretty available. I have never tried any other magazines with the exception of the GI and the Korean ones.
Right now, I have one slightly complicated question. The person says that they have two M1 carbines that shoot to the right quite a bit, and they've done some research and they've talked to a gunsmith, and it's confirmed that it is an issue, but they don't know where it's coming from. It's so bad that at 50 or 100 yards, the rear sight group itself has to be shifted to the left all the way to even get hits on target. Do you have any thoughts?
Is it this rear sight, the ladder sight that runs up and down like this, the later one?
I'm looking in the comments to see if they're responding, but I don't see an answer to that yet.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't know. I might try to put another rear sight on it. I don't know if that would make a difference. I think I would take it to a good gunsmith and have the front and rear sight checked to make sure that they are within spec. But I'm not aware of a chronic problem with that. I've never had, they've always shot pretty well for me. But he's saying he or she's saying they've got to run it all the way to the left.
Yep. Paul, it's the person's name is Paul. They just commented in the Zoom chat saying, yes, both the sight and the sight group have to be shifted over. What sight do you have on there, Paul, for the rear sight? Is it like the one that Scott is showing us right now?
Looks like this. Let me see if I can get it.
Same as what he is showing.
Oh, okay. Might try. It's dovetailed in there. And maybe measure where it's dovetailed. Is it centered evenly on the gun? Because there is a little bit of an overhang. Measure the overhang on both sides and make sure it's centered. At least on this, this one is dovetailed in there. And that would be one of the things I would check to make sure that it hasn't shifted in the dovetail to one side or the other. I don't know. I mean, that's all I could suggest. Or change the sight, have one drifted out and a new one put in there to see if that makes a difference. They should be pretty easy to get.
If it's centered, then it shoots to the right. I have to shift the sight group way over. I think at this point, it might be worthwhile to take it to pub chat after this.
Yeah.
And potentially send a picture or something.
Yeah.
So we can take a look at it.
Yeah. That's weird.
He said both of them are old historic rifles too, so that could be.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then you got to be careful with who works on it and the parts you put on it.
Yeah.
If it were a universal or something, I wouldn't worry about taking a hammer to it. But as a real GI one, I'd be pretty careful. They're getting fairly spendy these days.